Ed, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Honored to take part in this chat.
It's been a while. How many years? Three,
Several,
4
I think.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's gone by quickly.
I know it is.
Miss you here in New York. I'm sure you don't miss it.
I'll refrain, but no, there's some parts of the city I do miss. There's something about the energy of New York that you can't find anywhere else. You can go to Silicon Valley, you can go to LA, you can go to London. There's something about the energy in New York. Do you think it's back after COVID?
100%. I mean, I
Really?
think 2023, 2024, people were coming back into the city. Families were trying to rent, move in, and housing prices started to creep up. And then, of course, I mean, just with sports normalizing, I won't bore you with the Knicks, but that was a rally. I mean, like everybody was out and about. It's like, hey, here we are,
New
post
York's
pandemic,
back.
and New York's back. When you have millions and millions of people, and there's many more that work in New York than just reside here, but you have so many stories, so many, even in the most positive situations, you will have just utter chaos and other times. And so New York is just chaos. It's alive. It's always breathing. A lot of good, a lot of bad.
I do miss parts of it. I think pre-COVID was really, really fun. So you're telling us that you're a Knicks fan. Where did that begin?
It was a friend that invited me to free. He has season tickets. He said he couldn't go, and it was a couple years back. And I said, yeah, why not? And my kid had just turned, I think, 7. So yeah, it'd be a great experience. I'd grown up in California, so Warriors fan. But in New York, it's fun to have a lot of folks to talk sports. It's like, oh yeah. So went to the next game, and Brunson was injured, so we didn't see Jalen. But it was fun. My kid got into it, loved it, and then for the past few years, I've been go to a few Knicks games here and there, and here you go. It's been a phenomenal run. Went to 4 games this year. Won a playoff. Saw one of the Cavs games, and so it was great energy, very unifying factor, and just obviously a few heart attacks. Watching the finals here, but it was fun.
Good to hear.
Yeah, yeah.
So what part of California are you from?
San Jose, born and raised. And my dad was in Silicon Valley even before it was the Silicon Valley in the 70s. And so got to see the early part of that, and then went away to school in the 90s to Chicago, and haven't been back, but I relish kind of that entrepreneurial spirit ever since I grew up there.
What did your dad do?
He was an engineer, actually. He worked, and he was in the medical device side of things for a big portion of his career, and then ended up in the contract electronic manufacturing side as a company that does low volume, high complexity, quick turn for Silicon Valley based businesses. So if you needed to manufacture a device and prototype it, that was his thing. And it still is somewhat active in that company today too. So he's been in touch with the high tech sector for many decades.
Is it similar to, I would say, like a machine shop or like a job shop?
Yeah, think about, you have these at scale, and we're talking in Asia, they're putting up millions of PC boards and hooking up devices, assembling them. He does within a small office in the Bay Area. He has small, kind of low volume but high customization, not meant for super high volumes, but he can do runs of a couple hundred things here at a time. Sometimes there are US based businesses that want that quick turnaround, not have to worry about freight and
Yeah.
may have customers closer to home. So yeah, high
That
customization.
okay. So you
Yeah.
grew up in San Jose. You decided to move out, and then how did you discover New York?
Yeah, funny story. So trained undergrad med school in the Chicago area, and went through that. Good friends, family friends of mine connected me with my now wife, and so she was in New York. So that was the only reason why I went to New York. Is based in Chicago, was happy, doing residency, and I said, well, like let's go to New York. It's always a place that I've wanted to go, and I could certainly do worse in terms of being in a place with so much energy and and healthcare is there, business is there, and so I think it was a great time. And obviously met the woman I came to marry and have a family with too. So been here ever since. 25 years.
What drove you to go to med school? Was it encouraged by your parents, or did you have a mentor?
No mentors. Well, it goes back to second grade. I think they had you make these dioramas, and I don't know, diorama. And back then it was just paper, paste, scissors, and what I chose was, let's make a diorama of a little person helping someone out with boo boos. And at the time, I was insanely in love with Band-Aids. I would just put Band-Aids all over myself. And it was just this thing where I just was like, oh yeah, this is kind of neat. Like you can cut yourself and you could heal, but oh, you need this device to help you heal, and it's Band-Aid. And so all along the way, is grade school, middle school, I was thinking, well, like I was always drawn to biology and things, healing things, breaking down, cellular repair. And so the whole concept of just getting better, and was involved with church, and there was that human element of just helping others. And so kind of had this theme of wanting to help people just percolate through my childhood. And no one was really pushing it. No one was really demanding it. I was just like, hey, this is something. I mean, at the time, well, I was born in California, then I spent a number of years in Colorado. So it was fairly rural, and just it was a place where you just kind of develop your own thoughts, develop your own passions. And high school really continued to fall in love with biology, chemistry, the sciences. And I had the opportunity to really think hard about what do I want to do. And the opportunity came up to do a joint college meets med school program. And so I was fortunate enough to be part of that at Northwestern Chicago. And so that was it made it a nice path, and so obviously that was appealing, and it was aligned with what I had wanted to do. At the time was thinking about radiology. Actually, I was thinking about, because that was one of the most technically advanced areas. So in high school, I think my say was something to do with radiology or technology in healthcare, and thinking how we could image, and obviously with my father's connection to the medical device industry and nuclear medicine, I was like, oh yeah, this is a theme. And then moving through college, which I did major in the School of Speech, and in a major called communications. And so I really enjoyed the whole aspect of communication and connecting to people in care. And so that led to my just desire to stay more front and center in the patient care model, and be trained as an internal medicine doc, an internist. That was kind of my journey from a Band-Aid and a diorama to maybe going to the tech side of healthcare, and then landing squarely in the heart of just patient care continuum, communicating with patients. And so that's the med school story, the journey.
In med school, did you have any moments where it was overwhelming or it was too much and you thought, is this for me?
Yeah, I think probably the hardest part of medical school, and I think it's changed since then, but the hardest part is you're in these very memorization focused classes, memorizing microbiology, organic chemistry type of things, memorizing every single thing under the sun regarding reactions and things that there are some things you just learn once and just move on. And you're expected to really do well on these tests. But guess what? You're in medical school and you're alongside some brilliant people. And it's hard to maintain scores sometimes. And so there were some times like, wow, like I'm in the middle of the pack here, or I might have scored below the mean. Like, am I really meant to be a doc? Of course, you take solace in the fact that, hey, if you complete the requirements, you go through standardized testing, and if you meet the thresholds, you're still that MD. You have some tough moments where you're like, hey, this wasn't as easy as high school. This wasn't as easy as like even just college. And then you realize, hey, if I could just buckle up, get these things done, check the boxes here, you can still take care of patients. Much of medicine delivered today is not memorization. It's dealing with people, it's dealing with situations, it's dealing with processes. And so thankfully, you see the best physicians rely on things that they've learned, but not necessarily, just spew out volumes of information that we were beholden to back in medical school, filling out a Scantron.
What do you think the impact is with AI and med students today?
Yeah.
How are schools mitigating just regurgitation of AI?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I sit on the advisory board of a Northwestern based AI program, and they asked that they're trying to tackle this very question. And as opposed to leveraging AI to just do the work for students, they really encourage. I mean, I think the whole mantra today is, how do people think critically using the tools that are in front of them? Embrace AI, not not leverage it just to regurgitate an essay, regurgitate. That's just gonna happen. But and I was talking about this with some folks, is that there's likely going to be a very stark divide about true users and leveragers of AI in medicine versus just people that are just going to basically use AI as a big search engine, and I think that in medicine we're teaching medical students to focus on prompting correctly, medical students actually, more importantly, filtering out AI for, and I think the models are getting a lot better, but the early models there was a lot of slop, there was hallucinations, and I wouldn't even have colleagues or my own employees send me stuff, and I would say, have you taken a look at this? Like, filter this out and use your critical thinking. And I think that level of thinking is still going to be needed. Thankfully, the models are getting better, but AI in medicine in the early days was a little bit scary. Now that's getting a lot better. I mean, I think the model, it's harder and harder to find major issues. There's still some tweaks that need to be had, but I think that AI is here. I think the use case of AI still needs everything from governance to safeguards to QA checks to making sure that especially clinicians think when they use it, as opposed to just purely sitting on autopilot and letting it do all the work for.
We had a guest on that was talking about how some of the models will lie to you to solve the problem, because the problem you're giving it, their job is to solve it. And it doesn't matter how they solve it, they will solve it. And so with hallucinations and lack of critical thinking skills, is there a checks and balances from a human MD, or is there 2 or 3 checks and balances, or how does that work, especially when lives are on the line, or there's a prescription or medical procedure intervention that needs to happen?
Yeah. So this is where I would argue all that learning, all that memorization that you are taught in medical school does kick in, because you at least should be able to instill and leverage your own common sense that you've taken away from medical school. First, do no harm is the mantra that we have in medicine. And the last thing you want to do is have AI recommend something that we've studied, we've written about, we've been tested on. And if we screw that up with AI, then hey, like that's a major problem. And so we do need to rely on our true knowledge and patterns that we've treated patients, and we are the ultimate safeguard at the end of the day. It might be just one check and balance. That might be the case sometimes, where especially if you're the senior physician, like your buck stops with you. You may have, if you're an academic institution, you may have residents, fellows, medical students that may have multiple layers, but many cases, if you're the senior physician, you are it. Like it does stop with that doc, and so that may be the one chance. And so I truly believe that AI does need that last, especially if you're human to human, you're working with a patient. AI can do a lot of heavy lifting, but just critically think and make sure, hey, if this was your mother, is this how you would treat this patient?
You were an internal physician. What was your day-to-day like?
Yeah. So most of my early career was probably half or even a little bit more than half in administration of at health systems. And then about 20 to 40% of my time was patient care. Largely was hospital based. And so I was in the thick of dealing with sicker patients, ER patients, heart failure, pneumonia, people have infections. So my day to day would be it could range over the course of a week, 1 to 2 days seeing patients, and the other days working on many of the technology issues or problems for a health system. That was my interest in working with hospitals and health systems on improving IT, working on their electronic health record. And so it had always been my interest, even after medical school and residency, to stay involved with IT and healthcare. A lot of meetings.
Yeah, so yeah, it sounds like it. So you're almost an implementation partner for the EHRs. Going back and forth, is this where you got the entrepreneurial itch? What was the moment that spoke to you where you were seeing patients every day and then you were going over and solving this problem, and then you thought to yourself, or maybe somebody recognized this in you and said, you could do this better, or you can do this yourself, or you have an idea. Where did that moment come from?
So much of my early career was understanding how all these big companies were helping hospitals and helping doctors deliver their care digitally. Because when I first started med school, we were just introducing the first installations of Epic when I was at Northwestern. And Epic now is almost the standard, the behemoth, one of the huge EHR companies in the world. But I still had lots of pen and paper, writing notes. I mean, like, I was really at that interface between the two. And so even as I was going through med school residency, I was thinking, well, how can I insert myself into this? Well, but I'm just a little doc. I'm just a little guy. And there's always companies out there. And so it was almost gun shy to do anything on my own. And then you understand by deploying this. And I had done not only work with my own health system that I had been employed at a couple different health systems, but then I actually did several years of consulting where I went across the country working with health systems and seeing the same problems over and over and over. So now this is 2010, 2015. You realize, hey, there's a lot of repeatable processes here that need to be optimized, that need to be redone. And then probably about 2015, 2016, I had switched gears and said, well, why don't I consider going to the corporate side of things, and had worked for a company that did virtual scribing. So actually it was the initial phases of ambient listening and scribing and so we're onto something in terms of how we can document better. And then I started getting really interested in telemedicine. And that interest in telemedicine that I was seeing and the automations being built in telemedicine, that drove a lot of my interest to say, well, what companies are out there that are looking at telemedicine or thinking about how to deliver care remotely? Because I thought that was going to be the next wave. And this was 2015, 2016, where Teladoc was out, but it was nowhere near the standard of care that it is.
Terrible.
Yeah, I mean, that it is
It was
today.
terrible.
It was usable, but it was like,
Yeah.
early days.
I think it was more of a platform where they saw you, but then they just said, you should probably just go in anyway. I think that was reoccurring over and over. Like, you could barely see the physician. It was like the Stone Age for technology.
It was good for, hey, if you had an earache and I wanted to
Yeah.
prescribe you a med, done, check, but as we know, healthcare is a lot more than that. So that early stage telehealth, or even, the early underpinnings of telehealth is where I got interested in becoming involved with startups and learning about, well, what's this whole other side of starting companies? And then came across a company called Spring Health at the time and worked with the founding team there to launch some of its early models and care. And it was great experience. Learned so much in doing that and diving in with that founding team to build. And
You were the chief medical officer, right?
yeah,
Of Spring Health.
it was the first chief medical
Chris,
officer
if you
there.
can bring up, still a private company, but I think they just did a raise. If you could see what their valuation is now. I met April, I believe it was 2016. It was super early. I met her at a Bloomberg Women's Entrepreneurial event in New York, and
Mhm.
she had just pitched Spring Health, and it was, I think it was just founded like a few months before that. And people were kind of talking to her. I met her, and she was explaining what this was going to be. Okay,
To be honest, I don't know.
3.3. Is that what that says? I can't really see it.
Yeah, 3.3.
Somewhere in that
3.3
neighborhood.
billion.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So this is
Yeah.
valued around 3.3 billion. And it's just so cool having met April in 2016 when she founded it to now. You were chief medical officer. How many hats were you wearing back then?
My role was really, how do we commercialize these initial models that the founders had put together? How do we get this out there? I was initially brought in to potentially get this out to health systems, to hospitals. So we tried that model for a while because at the end of the day, they had great algorithms. They actually were taking machine learning, deploying it in really great ways to help patients get better faster. And what we all learned and what I had known from my health system days, it's it's a long road to sell to health systems. 6 months, 12 months, enterprise sales at minimum. And so chief medical officer that was my main role. Like how do I try to foster these relationships? But then there was a little bit of operating experience here. There's a little bit of legal because what we had done, it didn't take too long for us to realize that we needed to really get this out there faster. And so that was the pivot to employer side partnerships, and that happened pretty quickly. And so I was involved with the early underpinnings of how do you deploy this network of providers to help employers, but do it economically. So there's a little bit of strategy, a little bit of operations, there's legal. I mean, there's all this infrastructure, and so I had a great time, had a blast doing that,
Was
and
this your first experience with startups?
I had been involved with another startup that was involved in the ambient listening, the virtual scribe, but that was not in its true sense as startup-y as this experience. So this is probably my first really deep, hip deep, neck deep experience
Were you
involved with
there
a
for the
startup.
first cap raise for the seed or Series A?
I was there. They had just raised one of their seed rounds. I think and then after I joined, there was another seed round that was raised as well. So it was early days. Yeah,
Those are fun. Those days are really
it was
fun.
fun. It's really so dynamic because you realize, okay, well, this is not working. Let's go figure out a different way to do it, or maybe we need to market it a different way, putting up the website, bringing in marketing, email, like all it was so dynamic, and that love of that continues on. And it's just excited to be part of one of their first deployments and sales into the employer space. We went to employer conferences, and everybody would be like, "What is this? Do I need it?" But what I was so impassioned about, telemedicine, I did realize that probably the first scalable use cases of this was in telemental health,
Okay.
because you didn't need high resolution video. You didn't need a lot of diagnostic things that needed equipment. You could really help people from afar just with listening. Video, great, but even that, like you can hear a lot in individual's voice. So that was a good fit for early to mid deployments of telehealth. And And to this day, I think I was lucky to be at the right place, right time, and being along the ride there at Spring.
Was there a moment at Spring Health where you thought to yourself, entrepreneurship is not for me? There's too much risk here. I don't like this.
I never got that feeling at all. It was enjoyable. You had to ask your day, ask yourself every day that you get up, like, what do I want to do? And I really wanted to scale better processes out there. And so being able to give at that time, my passion was really how do I help thousands, at that point, hundreds, and that our N was so small, hundreds of patients to get better mental health. And for some, it can be really, really hard. Many employees hide and don't want to. It's fast forward. It's a little bit more transparent now. People talk about the therapist, but back then, 2016, 2017, people wanted to keep very, very quiet, and so giving something that's accessible, at least the early stages of something that's accessible for patients was really great. So I took a lot of joy in that, and I would do whatever was needed to try to make this enterprise grow. So it was exciting. Yeah.
And after Spring Health, did that launch you into your entrepreneurial journey?
I had the opportunity to become the chief medical officer at a health system that I really for a segment of the population I really cared for, and that is the older adult population. So for about a year and a half, I took a role as a chief medical officer, basically going back to nonprofit, and had never had that title of a chief medical officer in a health system setting, especially I almost went squarely into geriatrics coming out of residency. And so I definitely care about that patient population. And that was the next phase where I developed the next problem that I needed to address, which was readmissions. And seeing readmissions in the older adult population it's tough. I mean, you just hate it when people, what they call, bounce back to the hospital. And that was my metric. I own that metric, and I really wanted to improve that metric. One of the things that we did have, I was at a place called the New Jewish Home Health System for older adults is what we would call it. And they see a lot of New Yorkers there. Heart failure is a big thing in the older adult population. And when I started medical school, we would typically give patients 2 to 4 years to live after the diagnosis of heart failure. Now, people live decades. Medication, devices, cardiac rehab, which is something that I became near and dear. I saw the impact that it had on patients that went through it within our four walls there at the New Jewish Home. And I said, well, this is a good thing. There's a correlation between patients that go through that and reduced readmissions. I said, okay, well, this pulmonary rehab are the same thing. People with COPD, obstructive lung disease, going through pulmonary rehab would actually have lower readmission rates and better statistics, longevity. So that then rekindled my desire to jump back into entrepreneurism, and came together with some folks that had also that I had met at Spring, and they went and did their own things, and then we came back together, and we were the founding team at a company called Recora back in 2020. And so couldn't stay away from startup life too long, but I really it was very impactful for me to work with older adults, work with skilled nursing facilities, as well as short-term rehab, that whole aspect of care. You don't really see much as a medical student, even as a resident. And so I was deep into that. I was involved a bit going into COVID as well, and saw that impact on older adults. And actually it was just as we were heading into COVID that my co-founders and I said, well, let's tackle this thing called cardiac disease, not knowing the impact of COVID at the time.
When did you launch Recor Health? What month in 2020?
So I left my full-time role in February of 2020. So right before, so literally left my steady position and said, let's do this. Now, if you're trying to start a company, don't do it right at the beginning of COVID. We were aimed for our clients to be providers, health systems, doctors. They were so busy trying to keep people alive. And so it was crickets for many months but that was okay. It gave us some time to start this.
I just remember New York
Beginning.
so I was in New York at the time, and I see it must have been like March 2nd or something like that, where we had those 2,000 point swings in the market. And I just remember being in my office and was like, looked at my team and they're like, yeah, this is not right. And that, I think it was that day or the following day or something, the mayor at the time, Bill de Blasio, was like, we're going to shut down the city. And so on my walk home from the office, there's a Whole Foods in Tribeca, and that place was there. It was just shelves. There was nothing on it was literally just shelves. And the city was shut down. And then the next day we went for a walk, and I'll remember this for the rest of my life. But we were walking up the West Side Highway, and it was around, I think, City Tower, somewhere around there by Battery Park. And there was no cars, there was no people. And I saw a police horse galloping up the West Side Highway. And I was just like, what is going on? Is this the end of the world here? And so you launch a company in this chaos. I mean, New York is a horror show, disaster, complete meltdown. What happened?
I mean, at the time we were thinking, well, I already, like pulled the ripcord. I was like, we're going to do this. And so I distinctly remembered, well, I have a place 2 hours north of the city, and a little cabin in the woods. And so that's where I ended up going with my family. I actually had a family that was going to stay with us for what they thought was a couple days. Ended up being a few weeks to ride out the initial just uncertainty of March of 2020. My co-founders, they moved to Tennessee. They left New York as well, and they were out there for years. And so we were starting this company. What we thought we were going to be all together, but now we're there in Tennessee. We're doing this remotely in with the headwinds of COVID. So it gave us a lot of pause. Luckily, very lean. We were bootstrapping at this time. Seed funding. We raised a seed in the middle of 2020.
What did that look like? Was that all virtual? Where did you raise from? Was there any hesitation on their end?
Yeah. I think that you're right. At that time, all meetings were virtual. Maybe if you made it to investment committee, there was a in-person, masked meeting, but we did our entire raise virtually. And Pair VC in the Bay Area, they were the ones that led that round. We had a number of angels. We had some other smaller checks came in. We essentially raised a $2 million early seed round right in the middle of COVID team, because we had done this before. We did this as we knew what telemedicine was. We knew what telehealth was. Spring. I had credibility as a doc, credibility as helping older adults. Our narrative was we're gonna address heart disease. We're gonna make people live longer. We're gonna do it with cardiac rehab done virtually. And at the time, we were just in the throes of coming out of the pain of COVID. And so there was interest in how do we keep people living longer? And we had LOIs, we had some early product, but we had no signed contracts at the time. So we raised on LOIs and early interest and prototypes and wireframes, and it was all that we had at the time, but we needed to make this work, get some employees, get some engineers. And so that brought us through early to mid COVID.
Did you know how to organize the cap table, the board, raise, what a safe note? Did you know all this from Spring?
Yeah, fortunately we had a good amount of exposure from days at Spring. Certainly our CEO, Abhishek, had lived this as a founder. And then myself being involved, not only as at Spring, but I had advised some startups. I had done a little bit of angel investing myself, and so I'd seen some cap tables as well as talk to folks. But we had to triangulate and make sure that we were doing this the right way. So we talked to as many founder friends that we knew, and obviously things were different in a virtual setting, and obviously getting good legal counsel, talking to folks, trying to get the strongest VC we had. Obviously, you're as a founder, you're on the other side of the table from a VC, so you want to do it the right way. And so the biggest help we had was talking to other founders.
How many VC meetings did it take to get to the 2 million mark?
I think we were north of 50 different meetings. I mean, it was just, yeah. I mean, probably double that. I mean, 'cause
Yeah.
as I think back, I didn't count, but I mean, a lot of this is just cold pitches, and some funds weren't taking them virtually, and so it was odd time. Now the standard teaching is do as many meetings, however you can do them in the shortest amount of time, incite, FOMO, get it done. And it was hard to incite that right in the thick of COVID. We think we were doing it the right way. That was all we could do for that stage of the company.
Yeah, and I want to mention that I had a mentor tell me right before we raised for our startup, this is the biggest waste of your time. As a CEO, this is going to be the biggest distraction. And exactly what you're saying, Ed, is get through it and then move on. You need to focus on building your company and getting to the next level. After you closed, what did you do?
We got back to building. We were in after that close. We were in search of our first big customer where we had an LOI, and so actually our first partnership was with a health plan. Actually, it was a Blues plan in Michigan. And that was great. I mean, it's great to have that as an early startup. Hey, like I've heard of the Blues, I've heard of the state of Michigan. Great, and we're very fortunate, and I was connected to that LOI and that agreement through a dear friend of mine. All very above board. We went through the proper channels, but it was because of that first step, that credentializing. There was not a lot of revenue that came out of that, but boy, did that get some good head nods when you went into a meeting. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, sure. You're able to help my patients in rural Upper Peninsula, Michigan with your program. That's pretty cool. So we went, and two learnings. One, having that as a credentializing first step, huge. Like no one's going to say, what little plan? No, I mean, like this is a blues plan. Right. Great. Second, we learned is that a health plan is limited in terms of reaching its patients to get them to care. We realized, okay, and I knew this, but I mean, like this was really accentuated by the outreach problem. We could not find the right patients that needed this through a plan, through the lens of a health plan. So we set out to solely work with health systems because they own, in air quotes, the patient volume. They can help direct care. And so that's what's led us to our first major client, and still to this day, Geisinger Health System. We're very fortunate enough to have them on board. They took a bet, but it was win-win because in COVID, they were in the throes of decision making. Well, they had shut down. They had to shut down because of COVID, their cardiac rehab centers. And so they needed an alternative quickly. And then second, they needed to understand, well, to what extent do I open back up my centers if I'm delivering some of this program virtually? And so our anchor customer for the early days, for the first few years, was Geisinger. We've done studies with them, a great partner, and no better use case than if you're the major health system or one of the major health systems at central Pennsylvania, stretching all the way from east to west. They have just this swath of rural Pennsylvania where patients would have to travel hours to, even when but they were closed, but when they opened back up, they'd still have to travel hours to get to a cardiac rehab center. And we were able to help their patients, shipping out devices, getting them online. We all mastered the art of virtualization of a multi-month program for older adults. So it was a melding of things that I was just passionate about.
Recora is solving access to care, and you ship out this box. What were the contents of the box?
If a patient needed a device, there's a loaner tablet with an internet plan, with a cell plan on it. So that was the core differentiator that allowed us to gain patient access, allowed access to patients. Second, there were stretch bands. You can do a lot of exercise just with pulling basically a big rubber band. And then we'd tried various things. We had pulse oximeters, we had blood pressure cuffs. We tried different things along the way. But to this day, our core kit that we ship out is a tablet if they need one, that blood pressure cuff. It's manual. We found that patients just found it easier as opposed to getting it connected and Bluetooth and all that stuff. We save that for another time and another day. Manual. I mean, it's push button. It's a digital readout, and then these stretch bands, and that's the core of our kit. A lot can be done just on a Zoom session to get patients' heart rates up. Marching exercises. They can do what we call sit to stands. Get patients to stand up, sit down. So you can burn a lot of calories that way. Marching in place, stretching, things of that nature. So pretty simple kit, versatile.
What broke in Recora that you had to go meet Congress folks?
We had a deadline, May 11th, 2023, that came to be. So as Recora, then Aviary now, as we Recora Inc. marched ahead, we were staring at a cliff, and we called it the cliff. And many people in the industry knew that there was this cliff for lots of other things too. There was home health cliffs, there was this telehealth cliff, but our cliff was unique because this particular thing called cardiac rehab delivered in hospitals via virtual means was not on anybody's list to extend, to address, to go beyond 2023.
Was this just in the COVID relief funds? Okay, so there were sunsets on May 2023.
What our revenue depended on was something called Hospital Without Walls. That had a finite date after extensions and extensions of May 11th, 2023. We realized this, call it early 2022. Called up one of our advisors. Our advisors has been involved in lobbying, legal issues, and policy. And he said, you need to start advocacy quick and see if you can find a patch for this, find a way to extend. And so quickly connected us to a lobbyist, and we got started quickly.
So you have to raise, you have to figure out what works. You have to figure out product market fit. You have to figure out who your customer is. You have to figure out all of these things, ops, and now you have to go figure out how to get paid.
This was not on my bingo card. This was not on my bingo card. But we had to. It was must do. I mean, we were one of there were a few companies doing what we did, virtual cardiac rehab. We realized we had to do it. Otherwise, our revenue would go to zero quickly at the end of this cliff. So with desperation, put together a lobbying plan, worked with a great guy, Jim Link, Cormac Group, just spearheaded our effort. We ended up having 2 to 3 lobbying firms that we would work with to attack. And this is where the politics comes in. We had a Republican specialist. We had a Democratic specialist team. We had a Senate specialist because this was our livelihood. This was the company's livelihood. And so this was something we invested in, trying to get the best advice we could for the small little seed-funded company. By that time, we had fast forward, we had done a Series A, so we had a little bit more dry powder, but we needed a lifeline. And fortunately, there were individuals that were listening. Congress will listen. That's the greatest thing I learned. Of course, staffers you hear about staffers that just sit there and nod their head. But when you have a really good bipartisan issue that impacts rural America, urban, every walk of life, who wouldn't want their grandma to live longer if they had a heart? I mean, it was just a great story. People were listening. And within a matter of months, we actually had members of Congress starting in the House that said, "Hey, let's write a bill. Let's do this." And so at the time, it was Representative O'Halloran, Mr. Joyce, Representative Joyce, that were involved in the early formation of a bill to address this. Now, little did I know that, and this is me, the newbie that did not have the legislation on my bingo card, less than 5%, less than 4% ever make it to law. And many get jumbled along the way. Many get packaged and squeezed and massaged along the way. But we went full steam ahead. I brought in other industry partners. I brought professional organizations, societies, thankfully were on board. I'm going through this quickly. We've got some American Heart was on board. The cardiac rehab societies were on board. Pulmonary rehab society was on board. Lung organizations were. You start, and I would like to think that we were kind of the seed that was planted to push this forward. Now, I didn't let up. I mean, I kept going. This was a personal mission of mine, and as bipartisan, this took 3 Congresses. We had to reintroduce this bill 2 times to get it. And then finally in 2026, this bill was included in the telehealth language. Now, you're asking me, wait, it passed this year, 2026. How do we survive if we were facing a cliff? Well, we hit May 11th, 2023. Our revenue perished. It went to 0. So we actually hit the cliff. Fortunately, that cliff pertained to just hospital-based cardiac rehab delivered virtually. So in the months leading up to May, we were fortunate enough to work with partners. You can actually leverage what's called the professional fee schedule, which is doctor office billing. Now, that was still part of telehealth. It's a little confusing, but essentially we were able to work with physician office billing, professional billing locations. And these health systems generally would have a physician office billing component. And that was what kept us alive until 2026. We were billing these services. And there's a service called intensive cardiac rehab. And we melded that with physician billing to keep that revenue on. Fortunately, the cliff was only pertained to, as that waiver was, hospital without walls. That cliff only pertained to hospitals. Now, you'll say, Ed, why did I care? Why do we even care? Why do we even want this bill for hospitals? Well, 95% of this program, cardiac rehab, is delivered in hospitals. And everybody that was in this space knew we had to help hospitals out. Why is it that we could deliver this in physician offices and not hospitals? So became quite learned in these nuances of the regulation. And we met with CMS, we met with members of Congress, senator. I mean, just learned so much, and thankful to all those that supported this initiative along the way. Finally got into this. We realized, hey, you need what's called a vehicle. And so the vehicle was the larger telehealth, which was just, they kept kicking the can for telehealth down the road, 1 year, 6 months. So we had to hitch ourselves to that vehicle. We had to hitch ourselves to that problem in order to be able to get this through. So we were essentially riding the coattails of the need to prolong telehealth, and finally it passed in 2026. And now, and even to this day, that it still takes a while to get these hospital contracts signed, switched over back to the hospital side of things. So and even then, it's temporary. It's just still through the end of 2027. Fortunately, telehealth is big enough now that at the end of 2027, we'll have to decide, is this going to be another temporary kick it down the road for 2 years, 5 years, or is there some permanent side? There's certainly a lot of support for permanence, but obviously there's, budgets and congressional budget constraints. So that bingo card became my life. I've enjoyed every moment of it. Frustrating because none of it's in your control. You can only highlight, you can only try to tell the story. And I was telling the story of that patient in Upper Michigan. I was telling the story of patients that could not afford the gas to drive in person 3 hours. I was telling the story of patients that because of a virtual program, they were finally able to, like 85-year-old nurses that would finally be able to run a 5K, things like that. People that would sit at home using one of those reacher grabber things that forget going to the hospital, but guess what? Now they're able to, now they don't need that reacher. They can get up and walk around. I mean, it's just like stories where because of a virtual modality, their heart disease has at least been kept in check, if not better, because of being able to be taken care of at home.
Which is incredible. That's incredible for people to even live 1, 2, 3, 5 years more. I mean, this is an individual. This is a person, has loved ones. To me, it's absolutely crazy that May 11th, 2023, you're fighting for 5% to diversify your revenue. You made it all the way to 2026. I believe you did another raise to that, right?
Our last raise was late 2021. That was our Series
Okay.
A. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
2021. And you're okay for another year. What are you doing now to implement AI, other sources of revenue, and continue this fight in 2027?
We realized because our revenue went to zero, a big part of 2023, 2024 was getting to break even. We used as many tools as we could to trim operating, work on overhead, work on contracting, work on consulting dollars, just really trim it down. Probably about midway through 2024, I was able to leverage AI in different ways. There are a lot of manual steps in just our day to day. So automating that, leveraging that, using AI to help leverage outreach programs and algorithms, finding the right patients. All of these are automatable. All of these are search driven. All of these are things that were ripe for AI. And fortunately, we had the engineering chops to do this all in house. We actually we got to break even. And that was phenomenal to say, hey, we could survive indefinitely on this platform, on this program at break even. But that wasn't enough. We said, all right, we've built this chassis to work with health systems, partner on their list of patients that are eligible for a certain set of conditions. We had prior authorization processes. We had insurance eligibility processes. We had clinical eligibility processes. So we had actually built a little bit of a front of house and back office functionality of a health system and automated it to the hilt, technologically amplified it to the hilt to make this super efficient. And that became valuable to some of our partners. And so we're this day working on an AI-enabled solution to partner with lots of different, whether it's a provider, whether it's another startup, because if a startup wants to go on a different, work with patients on a different disease or providers on a different disease state, but they haven't benefited from the rich tooling that we have, we're working on trying to sell that. So it's taking what we've built, obviously leveraging it for our own platform, but we are testing to see if this is viable as a solution that we've in the marketplace, just seen that. So that's one. And then two, why stop at cardiac? So now we're working lung disease, pulmonary rehab. I myself, I'm specifically working on how do I how do I navigate my near and dear older adult to better care. So there's Medicare has a new set of codes that came out a couple years ago that focus on navigating. So it's called principal illness navigation. We're navigating a lot of older adults to answer the questions that their doctors don't have time to help them with. Doc, I have this new diagnosis. Can you sit down and work with me and trying to figure out all the options? Well, most docs just won't have the time for that. And so that's one aspect. And then others, they have social needs. And so there's Medicare is reimbursing for community supports. And so we're getting into that. Again, it's leveraging a lot of that same tooling that we've built. And so we're expanding it to essentially care management, the whole care continuum.
What is that rollout timeline? Is that something that's kind of an ongoing thing, or is this a goal?
As we speak, we're in the early throes of launching those other adjacent. One is more of a tech service platform deployment that should be coming out at midsummer, and then as we speak, we're deploying this other model called Pinnie Health. Pinnie, it comes from principal illness navigation. And so we have Pinnie Health that's being launched. We're helping older adults today. I mean, I just, nothing gives me greater joy than helping an older adult that is, they'll be on the phone crying. They'll say, I am stuck. My doc says I have this diagnosis, but I don't know how. Yeah, sure, they write me some referrals, but how? Like they're given a broad direction by their doc or their care team, but how do they really action it? And so fortunately, Medicare has been able to help reimburse for these advocacy services that give patients hope. And so I'd like to think of it as we're kind of full circle. We started very narrow, but we're broadening not only disease set, but also touching on social determinants, touching on just helping to bring patients to water as opposed to just pointing them loosely in that direction.
You had mentioned that you had some issues with them connecting to Bluetooth for the blood pressure machine. How do you translate AI or AI services to folks that have difficulty using technology or super rural settings?
There's two aspects of this. We like to joke that we spent more time trying to get an older adult on a Zoom session than we do actually delivering the clinical care. But we joke because if we can't get past that barrier, they can't get any care. So early days, we worked with older adult researchers, design experts. We read all the papers. We tried to, we have a silver mode. We basically have an older adult mode in our app to make it as simple. I mean, like large buttons, especially with vision accessibility needs. So things like that on the app. And then, of course, we have a lot of white glove service on the phone, white glove service, I can't figure out how to, if they had their own device, I can't figure out how to do this. Well, we would sit there, we'd make sure. And if they couldn't get it on their device, well, we would ship a loaner out to them. Like the loaners are locked down, simple to use, big button, like made to be as fail safe as possible. All you got to do is charge it. And even then, we would have stickers saying, this is where you charge it. We would try to make this as simple as possible. So that's the first half of tech literacy, just device enablement. Second, okay, now in the day and age of AI, not going to lie, we use AI agents on our calls. Our goal is to make this as human-like of an experience as possible. Sure, there are some that see through and they get in an AI doom loop, but that's few and far between. We've been able to help. A lot of our calls are about very basic things, and so handling 90% of that with AI agents. And again, they're just calling into a number, and so it's that we're using tech that patients are used to and leveraging AI to help them. And obviously, if they need escalation, we're there for them. We have humans at the ready to assist. So it's really, for this patient population, meeting them where they are with devices that are purpose-built for them, and then also leveraging AI in the easiest way that they can use, which is generally on the phone, text messaging. You've got plenty of 90-year-olds on text that are speed demons at it. So we've been really good at trying to optimize our tech flows for older adults as well. Short and sweet, not complex, keep it tight, easy we prompt for a response from them. So it's easy for them to action.
From your perspective of an MD, and then your perspective of an entrepreneur, and then your perspective of an MBA, what AI is overhyped in the healthcare industry right now?
AI for risk stratification is great, helping to narrow the funnel. I think AI for diagnosis, we're still a bit far. But I mean, there have been a number of studies that say, hey, using AI to diagnosis better than docs in some. But I think using it for diagnosis in and of itself is a bit far out, requires refinement, but that's one aspect of it. But then take a step further. Agentic AI is still early for healthcare. I think that using agents, chatbots, those are simple tasks, but leveraging AI fully as an agent is still early stage. So I don't know if people are hyping it up too much. So it's hard for me to say it's overhyped yet. I think we realize that it's still got some legs because for true clinical purposes, still requires guardrails, governance, people check in on that. And then obviously, just making sure that the right data is available. I mean, that's sometimes it's half the battle. You may not have all the data.
Do you think there'll be a point where AI has to sign off on an MD's work 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Just at the rapid pace that we're moving, is that a possibility?
I think it is. I think with the models that have grown, I mean, it could happen this year. I mean, it could happen as a step. Like, has this been AI So you may have a AI filtering step. Doctor approves it. Maybe the doctor writes some aspects, and then there's another AI check. So I think it's not out of the realm of possibility to have AI signing off, but still, the practice medicine, true medicine in any of the United States, we do need provider and physician involvement. But having AI sign off in it may not be a bad idea. It may be more comprehensive, maybe another step of QA. I still don't want that AI talking to patients and delivering news quite yet. I think generative AI to develop rough prompting can be so time saving. I think a lot of physicians would agree with me that using ambient scribing, a generative AI tool, get the 80%, 90% of a note out there, and then I'm tweaking 5 to 10% of it is a good balance for 2026 right now, and reduces the amount of what we call pajama time. Used to be that I would spend hours a night on my clinical time typing away, and truly gone are those days.
So AI can really be used for, I know you said to diagnose, it's not there yet. It will be. Would you say that if somebody missed something, or there's a kind of a checklist that AI said, hey, you should probably check this, or hey, this research said in this random hospital in this other state did this, can you check that out? So we're really integrating with AI. My question to you specifically here is, this is your passion, and I love this passion because it needs to be solved. All of this technology, how much does it penetrate access to care for rural individuals in this country?
I like to think of it as we can see patients more efficiently. Now, this is assuming that the provider is deploying it in an efficient manner, because that AI does not equal efficiency if, not 100% of the time, right? I mean, I can see some providers, some health systems that just are just throwing models, but not really deploying. But if I can truly, and this is what we ask ourselves every day, if our little company can deploy this care more efficiently and develop win-win partnerships with rural health systems, rural doctors, we can see more patients. That doctor's office or that health system can have just a bit more margin to see more charity cases, to see more types of cases, to hire one more staff member that takes care of a patient, holds their hand. So it's helping our partners get some mission back, get some margin back. And I think that that's the reach of AI. Also, I mentioned that AI is great at risk stratification, like just taking all this data about patients and trying to say, you're here, you're in trouble zone. Like you may be a patient we need to see. This is going to be great for rural America as long as they're plugged into some degree of healthcare where their data is part of a system. We can help better inform their care so that either they need to drive 6 hours to get to the ER, or can they stay at home? So that risk stratification driven by AI may better inform whether they spend those gallons of gas. And so that's how, we're seeing that today because of technology, because of AI. We're helping us stratify patients that you need to get in to see care because something's wrong. We're picking it up in the data. Or, hey, all systems look kind of go. You probably can handle this out there in the community with some telehealth. So I think the reach is driven by efficiency.
Is there any speed limits that you have to adhere to or anything that will hinder this because of HIPAA, meaning patient data? How do you mitigate that from AI models?
Yeah, there are, I'm not going to call out any specific health systems, but there are some that are very, very conservative when it comes to AI policies. They want to know exactly what you're doing. Whenever we work with a partner, this is part of our intake. We work with them on what can be deployed, what can't be deployed. There are going to be some health systems that probably want to limit the degree to which AI is used or limit the degree to which AI communicates with patients. And so those are going to be some speed bumps that are variable across the board. Beyond that side where with many more lives, I think that they're bound to be a bit more conservative. We've seen a lot of varying degrees of sensitivity on this issue. And so it's very real. It's all generally bespoke right now.
Healthcare in general is just fragmented from bigger institutions to smaller. Do you see that getting worse or do you see it coming together because of AI?
I think that I might be an outlier and say that I don't know that it's going to make a difference. It's fragmented because of different incentive structures. There's different incentive and regulatory structures. So states, because of regulatory barriers, you're going to have fragmented care because of that. To this day, if you only have a license in this state, you can't see a patient. That's going to remain. Then you have payer fragmentation. I don't know that AI is going to drive payer unification, payer alignment. Health plans are health plans. If anything, we're getting more and more fragmentation away from traditional Medicare. So we're seeing many more Medicare Advantage plans, not necessarily going to opine on good, bad MA plan, but that fractures care. I think that when you had 60, 70% of the population on traditional Medicare, that was a unifying force as a payer, especially for older adults. AI doesn't necessarily help that one way or the other. Providers, now, I will say this is where we might see some unification of care. We're likely going to see, because of AI, better adherence or at least better guideline delivered care. So maybe care principles that may be held in check by AI. And so I think the care itself might be more unified, but I think we're still going to be fragmented in the how, the what, the when, the where of healthcare. So I don't know that it's going to make a huge difference. I certainly don't think there's going to be a unifying shock to the system because of AI.
Yeah, it's tough, especially different parts of the country. I do think that AI will help, but not necessarily make it better, if that makes sense. Healthcare is just a beast, and I don't know how you do it every day, but you seem super excited about it and super stoked. It sounds like you guys are really making a lot of advancements in different areas. Where's Aviary Health in 5 years from now? Are you going to raise again?
So we've proven that we can break even on our core service line. We'll continue investing in that. We'll continue deploying that. Now with the legislation that we have, at least through the end of 2027, there should be good growth on that. And so our core service line, we should be seeing double-digit growth on the core service line. The two big bets that we're optimistic about, that's going to determine how quickly we raise. Depending on how quickly we can get double-digit growth on our technology platform that's being deployed in a commercial way, and then separately our Pinnie service line, which is wraparound care for the older adult, for caregivers. I would like that there are other competitors in the space, and I would like to think that it's a huge space. We've got a lot of Americans, older adult Americans on Medicare that really have no place to turn. And so I think it's a big space. There's space for some other entrants, and we believe we have a good platform to help a lot of patients. If all of those platforms are hopefully hockey sticking, we will need to raise, and it's just a matter of time. Even if only one of them pans out and continues to grow, then we will rally around that successful platform. Our main service line really delivering for us has given us the flexibility to drive these other service lines.
And do you plan on staying in New York? Are you going to expand to other states?
We're gonna stay
your
in New
office.
York. Yeah. Our main people operations center is in New York. We have a good deployed workforce across many states. I don't think that's changing anytime soon. I think we if anything, we would love more in-person work, because I think we think faster, we deliver faster, we grow faster, we just more creatively solve problems together. And so it would likely be rallying around whatever talent we can have in the New York area. Remains to be seen if we have a satellite office, but I think we need to grow into that.
And I know you had said this 2027 bill is a big headwind for you guys, but what other headwinds do you see for you?
As with all things Medicare related, we are subject to what Medicare caps, restrictions, CPT, that can change. And so we have to stay on our toes, understanding what the regulatory forces have ahead of us. Thankfully, we're on average dealing with services that they're not big ticket items, 5-digit, 6-digit surgeries. And so we have, they're less of a cost risk. But that being said, we have to be on our toes about that. And at the end of the day, we're still delivering great value. There's been great outcomes on this. I mean, like our main service line, virtual cardiac rehab, we're talking 38% reduction in readmissions for a patient that does that overnight. So, I mean, that's worth something. I mean, I think that's worth real dollars to not only Medicare, but to commercial payers. We think we're optimistic. Anybody that's in this space, I think, sees value in deploying more of these nutrition-based services, stress reduction, exercise. All of that reduces inflammation in the body. It reduces the risk of diabetes, cholesterol, recurrent heart attacks. It all just works together. And even the American Heart Association has published guidelines that focus on reducing stress, improving exercise. And I think an interesting one we haven't talked about is GLP-1s. Great advancement. But we're starting to see employer-sponsored insurances pull back, or even self-insured employers pull back on deploying GLP-1s, or they're making it stricter or tighter. Medicare is actually now subsidizing, but we're going to see some shifting in the market regarding GLP-1s, which very well may bring more nutrition-based services, exercise-based services, cardiac rehab type services, stress reduction services. So we might find ourselves in the mix of being part of a GLP prescription continuum, which is pretty interesting. So nothing's set in stone there, but I'm optimistic that some of this could involve programs that are like ours, akin to ours, and may be deployed.
From a longevity standpoint, exercise, good diet, less stress, do we know what GLP-1s do to longevity? Do we have those studies yet?
Yeah. late last year, there was a study that showed a correlation of cancer risk reduction among those that were taking GLP-1s. There are some cancers that are more correlated with obesity, with metabolic syndrome. We're talking endometrial cancer, some liver cancers. And so some of those studies have shown, okay, GLP-1s, and of course, lifestyle improvements can reduce cancer risk. There is an overwhelming amount of data for GLP-1s and reducing cardiovascular risk. So we're certainly seeing that impact longevity. GLP-1s are used in some heart failure patients, certainly patients that have diabetes with a lot of heart attacks that they've gone through. And so we're seeing a lot of this. And obviously the only counterpoint is to what extent are patients impacted by side effects. So that's the counterpoint there. And then cost. But hopefully we can get these costs down. Certainly Medicare is there. They have a pilot program focused on $50 a month on some GLP-1s. So that's helping out a lot of the Medicare population.
Is there any studies on peptides having the same effect as GLP-1s?
On peptides, I haven't read up on peptides themselves. They're a bit more fringe. I know there are docs that swear by them, but they're still not as front and center as the GLP-1s, the ones that are, there's just a lot more data on GLP-1s.
With GLP-1s, if a patient has heart failure or due to some things like obesity or diabetes, would you say their opportunity costs of not taking GLP-1s is less or greater because of the side effects?
I think for the right patient, there's a huge opportunity cost if you don't take a GLP-1. Now, thankfully, there are a lot of physicians that are on this and telling patients that have advanced diabetes, advanced morbid obesity, extremely high BMI. They're saying, we need to get you on this because you're not going to do well if you don't address sugars, blood pressure, heart failure, and the data is out there. And so I see patients on a daily basis that say, oh my gosh, I've lost 30 pounds since I've been on this. My LDLs have come down. My triglycerides have come down. My ejection fraction, so my heart failures get improved. I mean, it's just great stories. And then I have other patients that say, barely touch me. Well, the side effects have been too much. So your mileage is going to vary. But for the right patient, boy, GLPs can make a difference.
Going back to your California days, would you do this all over again?
You listen to Jensen Huang, and when he talks about would he do this again, and he says it's a long road. It is a long road. And in some way, shape, or form, he would say he would not do it. There are times where I think, well, I have had to sacrifice a little bit more time with the family, but boy, for me personally, I can't think of anything else that I've enjoyed more. Would I have enjoyed a very controlled 9-to-5 doc job, especially with AI? Yeah, it's great, predictable. But I get no greater joy when I can one day understand that tomorrow I can make one slight adjustment and deliver more care efficiently. Or if I'm doing something, I could turn this dial or turn that dial, and I can deliver even more outcome because of what we've built. That gives me a lot of joy. And so I'm passionate about it. There have been sacrifices along the way. I go back to my California. I think this is what I enjoy most. I do building and helping people. And obviously there's a great team that I'm fortunate to have along the way, co-founders, employees that have done this. And I'll sum it up by saying, so long as, and there have been some unbalanced days, but so long as you can try to aspire and perhaps achieve some degree of balance, then it makes sense. But it's not easy.
Yeah. I think the greatest joy as a founder is watching an idea come to life. My last question to you is, what advice would you give to folks that are in the healthcare space, trying to make a difference, building their startup. And the point I want to make here is even if you address a false perception, something that has never been done before, or the industry says it cannot be done, is a win on its own. Even if you attempt it and fail, it's still a win because you're addressing a false perception. And when you address a false perception, there's a slim chance that it can happen, that there can be some success. Maybe not with you. Maybe you have to lay the groundwork and then somebody else picks up the baton. But addressing the false perception, in my opinion, is a big win for an entrepreneur. What advice do you have for entrepreneurs, young, middle-aged, older, trying to address something, trying to solve something, and building in the healthcare space?
Yeah, I'll take it in two ways. One, for those that are perhaps on the younger entrepreneurial stage, coming out of undergrad, maybe even cutting out of undergrad, learn from other founders. I think that's the number one thing. And then don't build it alone. I think there are tons of studies that show that if you can have a strong, solid co-founder or multiple co-founders, that's a tailwind. For mid or later career founders, I'll call myself a mid-career founder, the one piece of advice is find the asymmetric bet on yourself. Find where you can truly be leveraged. For me, it was, okay, for all these years of healthcare IT implementations, I've got doc, street cred. That was an asymmetric bet on our company. Let's leverage that. And co-founders tech, another co-founders growth and partnerships. Make your bet as asymmetric as possible and push the envelope. Find out if there are things on your bingo card that you didn't start with. Make smart decisions on whether or not you pursue that. Your time is worth a lot. And we took a bet on advocacy, and looking back, let's say this company fails, I will still take solace in the fact that we did something, we brought to light a problem. We were instrumental in helping getting this across a legislative finish line. And if nothing else, I have helped deliver more access because of that. Now, is that success for our startup? Not necessarily. I mean, it's a step, but if, let's say, I fail tomorrow in the startup, I will have enjoyed every minute of it. But I would like to think, because we've deployed asymmetric bets and lots of them wherever we can, that we can be successful.
I think you're going to do great, and you're doing incredible work. And
we're trying.
Thank you so much for coming on here. Your story is incredible, and this is really why we founded Founder IQ. There's so many founder podcasts out there, founders that talk about their success and their raise, and there's even podcasts out there that talk about 1800 founders and early 1900s, which is fantastic. It's great motivation, but I really wanted to build something to hear from true entrepreneurs so that aspiring entrepreneurs understand what it takes, because entrepreneurship is not for everybody. There's a big difference between being a good employee and an entrepreneur. And so that's what we're trying to solve here, is highlighting what it actually takes and what it entails to be an entrepreneur. So again, thank you so much for coming on. Thanks for sharing your story. You're an incredible person, and I think you're doing really well.
Thanks for having me. All the best with Founder IQ. I think it's a great resource. Just having these long discussions, diving deep into current founder trends, entrepreneurial roadblocks, how to bust through them. Everybody's going to have their different take, but I think you'll find that folks will take away some great themes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Best of luck to you.
Thanks, Mark.
Legal disclaimer: the views and opinions and statements expressed in this podcast are those of individual speakers and do not reflect the views of their organizations or the producer. This content is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be construed as medical, financial, legal, tax, or investment advice. You should always consult appropriate professionals before making decisions related to your health, finances, business, or legal matters. References to any companies or services do not constitute endorsements. The producer and participants disclaim all liability for actions taken based on this content and make no representations as to its accuracy or completeness.